The gravity on Seraph Prime felt wrong. Not heavy enough to strain, but just enough to make Jaron Blackwood's steps feel slightly off balance as he descended from the diplomatic shuttle. The landing platform gleamed under the orange-tinted light of the system's binary stars, all smooth curves and crystalline surfaces that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being built upon it. "Welcome to Seraph Prime, Mr. Blackwood." The voice was melodic, each syllable carrying an almost musical quality that made his name sound like something beautiful instead of the plain Earth surname it was. Jaron turned to find himself facing a woman who made his carefully prepared diplomatic composure falter. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with skin the color of deep amethyst that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Intricate silver markings traced patterns across her exposed arms and collarbone, glowing softly with each breath she took. Her hair was a cascade of white silver that moved as if underwater, defying the gentle breeze that swept across the platform. She wore fitted clothing that blended function with elegance, a bodysuit of deep purple and black that left her marked arms bare, and hugged curves that Jaron tried very hard not to notice. Her eyes, large and luminous like pools of mercury, regarded him with professional coolness. "I'm Vesha Morwen," she continued, offering a gesture that was part bow, part hand flourish. "I've been assigned as your liaison during your visit to our research facilities." Jaron cleared his throat, adjusting the collar of his diplomatic jacket. "Thank you, Miss Morwen. I appreciate the Serati government's cooperation with the Interspecies Council's inspection protocols. Call me Vesha." Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those mercury eyes. "And let's not pretend this is merely a courtesy visit, Mr. Blackwood. Your council has concerns about our biological research programs." "Jaron," he offered, matching her directness. "And yes, there have been questions raised about some of your projects." "Questions?" Vesha turned, gesturing for him to follow as she led him toward a waiting transport pod. "Your Terran diplomats have a gift for understatement. What they really mean is they suspect us of developing weapons, don't they?" The transport pod was sleek and organic-looking, like everything else on this world. As they settled into seats that molded themselves to their bodies, Jaron studied his guide more carefully. Most liaisons tried to deflect or reassure. Vesha's bluntness was either refreshing or calculated. "The Council wants transparency," Jaron said carefully. "Several member species have expressed concerns about classified biological projects, especially those involving apex predators." Vesha's silver markings pulsed slightly brighter embarrassment. Anger? He didn't know enough about Serati physiology to tell. "Then you'll be interested in today's unscheduled addition to your itinerary." The pod lifted smoothly, carrying them over a city that looked like it had been grown rather than constructed. Towers of living crystal spiraled toward the orange sky, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of woven light. Despite the beauty, Jaron noticed the unusual number of armed guards stationed at key points. "What addition?" he asked. "There's been an incident at our Apex research facility." Vesha's voice remained level, but her markings dimmed slightly. "A containment failure. The Council wants an outside witness before they resolve the situation." "Resolve?" Jaron felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Execute," Vesha said quietly. "They're going to kill it at dawn tomorrow." The transport descended toward a facility that contrasted sharply with the elegant city. This was all harsh angles and reinforced barriers, a fortress surrounding a complex of gray buildings. Guards with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy watched their approach with obvious tension. They passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each more thorough than the last. By the time they entered the main containment hall, Jaron's diplomatic immunity had been verified, his biological signature scanned, and his intentions questioned twice. The hall itself was massive, easily 100 feet high, with walls of reinforced transparent alloy. And in the center, trapped in a cage that crackled with some kind of energy field, was the most magnificent creature Jaren had ever seen. The razorwing was enormous, easily the size of a small spacecraft. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between deep crimson and molten gold, each one edged with what looked like natural metallic trim. 4 powerful legs ended in talons that had scarred the reinforced floor. But it was the wings that took Jaren's breath away, vast membranes of translucent tissue stretched between elegant bone structures, shot through with veins that glowed like rivers of fire. The creature's head was serpentine and graceful, with swept-back horns and eyes that glowed with intelligence. Those eyes fixed on Jaren as he entered, tracking his movement with unsettling focus. "By the stars," Jaren breathed. "A razorwing," Vesha said, standing close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her bioluminescent markings. "Native to our southern volcanoes. This is the last of its kind in captivity." A Sarati male in elaborate robes approached them, his markings a deep gold that spoke of high status. "The Terran observer," he said, not quite managing to keep the disdain from his voice. "I am Director Velthus. You arrive at a convenient time. Human. This beast killed 2 of my researchers 3 days ago. The Council has ordered its termination, and your presence will verify that we followed proper protocols." Jaren barely heard him. He was watching the razorwing, noting the way it held itself. The creature wasn't aggressive. It was cornered, desperate. Its breathing was labored, and one wing hung at an odd angle. "When did it last eat?" Jaren asked suddenly. Velthus frowned. "It has refused all food since the incident." "Since the incident, or since before?" Jaren pressed, moving closer to the cage despite Vesha's hand on his arm. "Does it matter?" Velthus snapped. "The creature is dangerous and unmanageable. The execution is scheduled for dawn. Your report should reflect that all appropriate measures were taken." Jaren studied the razorwing's eyes. There was intelligence there, and fear. The creature wasn't a mindless killer. Something else was happening here. "I'd like to observe the creature overnight," Jaren said, "before making my report." Velthus's markings flared bright gold with anger. "That is not part of the inspection protocol. Then consider it an addendum." Jaren turned to face the director fully. "The Interspecies Council sent me to verify proper treatment of biological subjects. I can't do that in 10 minutes. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Velthus jerked his head in a sharp nod. "As you wish. Vesha will remain with you. But when dawn comes, and the beast still lives, remember that its death will be on your head for delaying the inevitable." As Velthus stalked away, Vesha moved to stand beside Jaren. Her markings pulsed with an emotion he couldn't read. "That was either very brave or very stupid," she murmured. Jaren kept his eyes on the razorwing, which had settled slightly, watching him with those glowing eyes. "I've been called both, usually by the same people." For the first time since they'd met, Vesha smiled, a small, genuine expression that made her markings brighten. "I'm beginning to think Earth diplomats are more interesting than I was told." "Wait until you see us really work," Jaren replied, already planning what he'd do when darkness fell. The razorwing rumbled a sound that vibrated through the floor, and somehow Jaren knew the creature understood more than anyone realized. Tomorrow, they would try to kill this magnificent being. Tonight, Jaren was going to find out why someone wanted it dead so badly. And judging by the way Vesha was studying him with those mercury eyes, he had a feeling he wasn't going to be working alone. The twin moons of Sereth Prime cast pale orange light through the transparent sections of Jaren's assigned quarters. He sat on the edge of the bed, if you could call the conforming gel platform a bed, reviewing the data files Vesha had provided about the razorwing. The official reports were sanitized, clinical, and completely unsatisfying. According to the records, the razorwing had been captured 6 months ago for adaptive research into extreme environment survival. The creature had been docile until 3 days ago, when it allegedly attacked 2 handlers without provocation. Both had been killed, their bodies too damaged for recovery. Jaren didn't believe a word of it. He'd spent another hour in the containment hall after Velthus left, observing the creature from various angles. The razorwing's behavior wasn't that of a mindless killer. It was protective, defensive. And that injured wing hadn't come from thrashing against its cage. The damage was too precise, too deliberate. Someone had heard it. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Desha standing there, no longer in her official liaison attire. She wore something simpler, a fitted outfit in shades of midnight blue that made her bioluminescent markings stand out like silver fire against her amethyst skin. Her white-silver hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders. "I wondered when you'd come," Jaren said, stepping aside to let her enter. Esha's mercury eyes studied him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "You're planning something foolish. I wanted to be here when you did it. Foolish is subjective. Breaking into a high-security facility to interfere with an official execution?" Desha moved closer, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns her markings traced across her skin. "On my world, that's not subjective. That's suicide." Jaren met her gaze steadily. "Then why are you here?" She was quiet for a long moment, her markings pulsing in a rhythm that seemed to match his own heartbeat. "Because I've watched that creature for weeks. I was there when they broke its wing to make it more manageable. I heard it cry out, not in rage, but in pain and confusion. And I did nothing. You couldn't have stopped them." "No," Desha agreed, her voice soft. "But I can help you now, if you're truly going to try something impossibly reckless." "I am." Jaren pulled a small pack from under his bed, checking the contents. "That razorwing isn't a mindless beast. Something happened in that facility, and Velthus is covering it up. I need to know what." Desha reached out, her hand catching his wrist. Her touch was warm, almost electric. "If we're caught, they'll execute both of us alongside the razorwing. And we won't get caught." Jaren turned his hand to clasp hers, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to do this, Desha. You could report me right now. Be a hero." Her markings flared brighter, traveling down her arms to where their hands joined. "I stopped being a hero the moment I let them torture that creature. Maybe it's time I did something that actually matters." The connection between them felt charged with more than just the danger they were about to face. Jaren found himself very aware of how close she was standing, the way her eyes reflected the moonlight, the subtle scent of her something like ozone and flowers. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than intended, "before I lose my nerve." Desha smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from beautiful to breathtaking. "Humans don't lose their nerve. It's what makes you simultaneously admirable and infuriating." They moved through the facility's service corridors using routes Desha knew from her years working as a liaison. Her access codes bypassed most security systems, and her knowledge of guard rotation patterns helped them avoid the rest. "You've been planning this," Jaren observed as they slipped past another checkpoint. "I've been thinking about it," Desha corrected. "There's a difference. Thinking doesn't get you executed." They reached the containment hall through a maintenance access tunnel. The massive space was dimly lit, emergency lighting casting long shadows across the floor. The razorwing was a dark silhouette in its cage, but those glowing eyes tracked their approach immediately. "Easy," Jaren whispered, approaching slowly. "We're here to help." The creature rumbled a sound that Jaren felt in his bones. Not aggressive, but questioning. "In my culture," Desha said softly, standing beside him, "we believe all living things have a soul light. The razorwings were considered sacred once, before science replaced spirituality. They say if you can see a razor-wing's soul light, it will know your intentions. Jaren reached into his pack, pulling out several protein bars he'd brought from Earth. Let's hope my intentions are clear enough. He unwrapped one carefully, the sweet scent of chocolate and nuts filling the air. The razor-wing's nostrils flared, its massive head tilting in curiosity. Jaren, Desha warned. Those bars contain compounds that might be toxic too. But Jaren was already extending his hand through the energy field, which didn't shock him, merely tingled against his skin. A failsafe, he realized. The field was meant to contain, not harm. The razor-wing moved with surprising delicacy, its serpentine neck extending until its massive head was mere inches from Jaren's hand. Those glowing eyes studied him, and for a moment, Jaren felt utterly exposed, as if the creature could see every thought, every doubt, every secret he'd ever held. Then, gently, the razor-wing took the protein bar with its mouth, careful not to touch Jaren's fingers with its formidable teeth. It consumed the food in one swift motion, then made a sound softer, almost questioning. I think he likes it, Jaren said, amazed. Desha moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. This is impossible. Razor-wings are apex predators. They don't trust other species. Maybe they just needed someone to trust them first. Jaren reached his hand further, touching the scales on the razor-wing's snout. They were warm and surprisingly smooth, humming with an internal energy that reminded him of Desha's bioluminescent markings. The creature closed its eyes, leaning into the touch with a rumbling purr that vibrated through the entire chamber. By the ancient lights, Desha breathed. She tentatively reached out her own hand, and when the razor-wing didn't pull away, she placed her palm against its scales. Her markings flared brilliantly in response, silver light dancing across the creature's crimson and gold surface. I can feel its soul light. It's beautiful. Jaren turned to her, struck by the wonder in her expression. In that moment, with her markings blazing and her eyes wide with amazement, she was the most stunning thing he'd ever seen. Desha, he began. Not sure what he wanted to say, she looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face made her own markings pulse faster. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words and possibilities. The moment shattered as alarms erupted throughout the facility. Unauthorized access detected in Containment Hall 7, announced an automated voice. Security teams deploying. They found us, Desha said, but she didn't sound afraid, she sounded determined. We need to release it now. Can you override the cage controls? I can, but Jaren, if we do this, we're committed. No going back. He looked at the razor-wing, still pressed against their hands with trust in its eyes. Then he looked at Desha, her markings blazing like silver fire in the dim light, her mercury eyes fierce and certain. Some choices are easy, he said. Desha ran to the control panel, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The cage has multiple locks. I can disengage them, but it will take 90 seconds. We don't have 90 seconds. As if to prove his point, the main doors exploded inward. Director Velthus strode through, flanked by a dozen security personnel in combat armor. He'd donned some kind of mechanical exoskeleton that doubled his height and bristled with weapons. Traitors. Velthus's voice boomed through amplifiers. The human has corrupted you, Desha. The Council will have both your heads for this. The razor-wing roared a sound that shook the walls and made the security team hesitate. But it couldn't break free. Not yet. 60 seconds, Desha called out, her hands never stopping their work. Velthus raised an arm, and a weapon port opened in his exoskeleton. Then you'll die before the locks disengage. Jaren didn't think he just moved. He sprinted toward Velthus, drawing a small plasma cutter from his pack. It wasn't a weapon, but at close range, it might work. The security team opened fire, But their shots went wide as the razor wing thrashed against its cage, drawing their attention and their aim. Jaren dove under Velphus's first blast, rolled, and came up inside the exoskeleton's reach. 30 seconds. Vesha shouted. Jaren activated the plasma cutter and drove it into the exoskeleton's knee joint. The tool wasn't meant for this, but the focused heat did its job. The joint sparked and failed, and Velphus toppled, cursing. "Stop them!" Velphus screamed. The security team moved to comply, but the razor-wing scales began to glow first dull red, then orange, then brilliant white gold. The creature opened its massive jaws, and instead of a roar, it released a beam of pure energy that melted the floor between the security team and Vesha. 15 seconds. Vesha's voice was strained. Jaren ran back to her, putting himself between Vesha and the recovering security forces. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm glad I met you." Her markings blazed so bright he had to squint. "Tell me that when we're not about to die." The final lock disengaged with a resonant clang. The energy field flickered and died. The razor wing was free. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the creature rose to its full height, its injured wing extending despite the pain, scales blazing with inner fire. It looked at Jaren and Vesha, and then at the security forces. It lowered its body in a clear invitation. "It wants us to ride it," Jaren said, disbelieving. "Of course it does." Vesha laughed, half hysteria, half joy. Because tonight wasn't insane enough. They ran and jumped onto the razor-wing's back just as the security team opened fire in earnest. The creature's scales deflected most of the shots, and those that came close were blocked by Jaren pulling Nessa against him, using his body as a shield. The razor-wing roared once more, then surged forward with impossible speed. It smashed through the transparent wall at the far end of the hall, sending fragments of alloy spinning into the night. The orange moons filled Jaren's vision as they burst into open air. And then they were flying soaring over the crystalline city on the back of a creature that shouldn't trust them, fleeing from everything Vesha had ever known. She pressed against Jaren's back, her arms wrapped around his waist, her markings pulsing against him in a rhythm that matched his racing heart. Despite everything, the danger, the impossibility, the uncertain future, Jaren found himself smiling. "Where to?" Vesha shouted over the wind. "Anywhere but here." Jaren called back. The razor-wing banked hard, aiming for the horizon where the binary stars would soon rise. Behind them, alarms wailed and pursuit craft began to launch. Their escape had only just begun, and already Jaren knew nothing would ever be the same. Not for him, not for Vesha, and not for the magnificent creature carrying them toward an uncertain dawn. But as Vesha's grip tightened around him, and her laughter wild and free rang out into the night, Jaren decided that some kinds of uncertainty were worth embracing.